This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. We're going to talk about non-alcoholic brewing on today's episode of the podcast. Joining me from England, but live here in Denver, Colorado, is Jordan Childs, founder of Mash Gang. Welcome to the podcast, Jordan.
Thank you so much for having me. This is better than a Zoom call, isn't it?
It's a way better one than a Zoom call. We had originally planned to do this one remotely, and then turns out you guys decided to come to Colorado, do a week of events and, promoting the Mash Gang brand. And, so here we are.
It just, the stars aligned on this one. And I was kind of upset because it got canceled in my calendar. And then I read the email and it's like, because you're going to do it face to face. And I was like, hell yeah.
And so here we are drinking on a Tuesday afternoon, drinking some beer here in the conference room of our co-working space in Denver, some non-alcoholic beer, some non-alcoholic Mash Gang beer, in fact.
If a lot of brewers listen to this, drinking in the day is not going to be exactly a surprise for them.
I know. So, but I think we're doing it responsibly.
The old tagline was drink responsibly, irresponsibly.
Sounds like a good plan. Well, we're going to be responsible and irresponsible over the course of this podcast because you have agreed to talk to me about your process behind this. I think as everyone in the world of brewing knows, there are some folks out there that get very protective of their processes around non-alcoholic brewing. And so when I am able to find folks that are willing to talk to me about how they are doing it, I jump at the opportunity. Had a great conversation with Gabe at Boreal up in Quebec a couple weeks ago. And, also about non-alcoholic brewing. They're doing it at a large scale. They're the number 2 brand in Quebec behind Corona.
Well, yeah, I certainly heard them.
Yeah. And anyway, so when this opportunity came up, I thought, and you are willing to talk about how you are brewing these beers. Couldn't say no. So over the course of this, we're going to talk about you brew across a range of styles, everything from light lager style to dark beer style to the hazy IPA style that we're drinking right now, Chug. We're going to talk about how you go through that, what the method is or methods, depending on if there's some style dependency to the different methods that you use for producing non-alcoholic beer. We're going to talk about all the things like building body in those beers, about balancing hops, about finding extraction in these non-alcohol solutions, which obviously for brewers is a huge problem because alcohol is a great solvent, and without it, even getting extraction from something like hops becomes its own interesting challenge. And over the course of this, we're going to try to understand what makes Mash Gang Brewing special.
I like that. I mean, the ethanol part is really interesting because I don't know if it's like bro science, but I always figured that was doing the heavy lift, but actually under sort of 4%, it doesn't really have much effectiveness. It's more effective than nothing, but not as effective as it could be. And I think that's kind of interesting because I had to understand a lot of the rules before I could begin to break them. But a lot of the discovery about how ethanol interacts with hops and things like that it's probably one of the more interesting parts of how we created this.
I cannot wait to talk more about it. Thank you. That's a wonderful tease. Before we do that, for years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across North America and beyond. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built over the past 30 years because brewing doesn't stop at 5 o'clock. And nor do they. They use quality components, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. And with their 24/7 service and support, your brewery will never stop. Remote monitor your chiller for simple and fast access to all the information you need and gain peace of mind your operation is running smoothly. And brewers, what if your yeast could do more than just ferment? With Berkeley Yeast, it can. They bioengineer ordinary strains and make them extraordinary, enhancing the flavors you want and eliminating the ones you don't. Now, in addition to competitive pricing, they're offering free overnight shipping on 5+ barrel pitches. Try it out. If you don't love it, they'll happily refund you. So why settle for ordinary when you can brew with better yeast? Visit berkeleyyeast.com to learn more and start brewing with science on your side. Speaking of companies that make non-alcoholic fermentation yeast right there. Anyway, Also, every beer menu could use a refresh button on the fruit flavors. That's why it's time to revisit Old Orchard's flavored craft juice concentrate blends, where the latest additions include fruit punch, guava, kiwi, and pomegranate. They aren't stopping there and welcome flavor suggestions from the brewing industry. More information and free samples are waiting at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer. All right, Jordan, give us your story. Where'd the brewing thing start for you? And then give us the Mash Gang origin story.
So I'm gonna go right to the beginning. So the first thing that I ever actually ferment was there was a load of apple trees growing around where my grandparents lived, and I heard about scrumpy. I don't know if you ever know what it is. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was literally like a child. And I cut up all these apples, put them in 5 demijohns, and my dad caught me and went absolutely up the wall. But I always had a fascination with just doing stuff. I was always, like baking, and, I wanted to make perfume or jam and jellies. And, I was always kind of a hands-on kind of guy. The next step is when you're kind of a teenage boy and you want to drink beer and you can't. My dad's idea was, well, make it yourself, So I got a really terrible homebrew kit that was like Aussie lager style. That was never going to go well, really, was it? And that was terrible. It smelled of eggs, and it just never cleared up. And then the second kit I did was Woodford's Wherry, which was like a sort of older style English ale. And that was actually pretty damn good. At this point, I'm probably like 14 or 15 years old. And my parents wouldn't let me keep the beer. I think my dad just thought I'd be too lazy to actually do it. So that's the very beginning.
You did it.
Then I did it.
And then he drank your beer.
Yeah, and then he drank my beer.
Was it any good?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, at some point, like a little later on, I actually have a little bit of a cottage industry going, selling beer. Do you remember those milk jugs? Yeah. So I used to sell that to like my parents' friends and stuff as a bit of pocket money. So I was like the beer baron at an early age. And then I kind of discovered all the other things that boys like motorcycles and video games and that sort of thing. I would get a job at a vineyard that was a startup vineyard. There wasn't a great deal of English wine, and it sounds a bit like an oxymoron, really. But we actually now make, thanks to climate crises,
right?
We actually can make very nice sparkling wine in southern England.
English sparkling wine is a thing, and those champagne houses have all been buying property in England in order to hedge against their own climate challenges.
I'm growing grapes in North Wales now.
Wow.
And that makes the most of England look like the Napa Valley. It's really not ideal for it, but a couple of varietals are growing. But that was where I got my first graft and grinding. I was literally digging ditches and trimming vines. And there was a vintner called Hans Schleifer from Germany, it's no surprise. And he introduced me to sort of like all of the cultivars, like Madeleine Angevine and, loads of sort of bizarre German grapes. And that was the first, I think it started to get its hooks in me, that we had the first year we had noble rot. So it really affects the grapes. They go like all disgusting looking, but it makes great wine. And I was just fascinated by the whole process. Brewing is like, it's alchemy, right? It's as close as you can get to magic. You put pretty terrible but humble ingredients together. Cereal, some flowers, yeast. It doesn't sound great. When you're making your wort up, it's not exactly an alluring product. And then somehow through time and pressure, it's forged into this crystal clear, beautiful liquid that unites people, divides people, that is loved and argued and fought over. And I think that's really interesting. It would be years and years. I was brewing, and then my wife, like home brewing, and my wife got pregnant and didn't like the smell of Hefeweizens yeast in the house anymore. So I knocked that on the head for a good long time. I was running a tattoo studio with my wife for nearly a decade. COVID, we just got a new premises. COVID came along, And the landlord said, I still want my money. And the government said, we still want our taxes. And our staff said, we would like to get paid still. And we couldn't do any of that. And we hobbled along, and then we lost our house and we lost our business. It was real. But it was also the catalyst for what would become the greatest time in my life. I would actually, for the first time, come home from work and see my daughter and my wife, and I would be at home, I'd be present, wasn't busy. But the devil makes work for idle hands, and I was incredibly bored whilst they were doing school stuff or things like that. And I ended up watching It's Alive with Brad Leone on the Bon Appetit channel. If you haven't seen it, it's like a fermentation masterclass of every single type of thing. And the guy's so affable, lovable, and has a real love for what he does. And I learnt so quickly. And I actually, I didn't mean to make beer. I didn't mean to make non-alcoholic beer, right? I was actually trying to make tepache, which is kind of, if there's any British people, it's kind of like ginger beer made out of pineapples.
Right.
But it's really, really delicious. And there was a local store that during COVID struggled with supply lines. They just end up with loads of one fruit. And two fruits they end up getting a lot was mangoes and pineapples. So all of our beers, even today, they have echoes of mango because it was so cheap, which is, that's what I was using. I made a tepache, and then I made a hopped tepache. I thought that'd be nice. And then everyone was like, I love the pineapple beer you do. And it wasn't. And then it became the pineapple beer, And then I thought I'd have a crack at making beer again. So I made my own brew kit, plastic buckets and stuff from aquarium supplies. So, and the heating element was a really dangerous piece of equipment. It was basically like a heating element with a plug on it that you're supposed to put in a cup for making 1 cup of tea, like boiling a cup. And I used that as the system. It had a couple of corny kegs and a soda stream for carbonating test stuff. And then I would just bug the hell out of breweries and say, if you're not producing much anymore, do you have open bags of hops, things that are going out of date, things you can't use? And a lot of great breweries sent me stuff. And I brewed hundreds of batches. I wouldn't even get round to bottling them or anything. I would make a bunch of stuff and then I would ditch it down the drain. In fact, it's a story I've heard.
Taste, learn, trash it.
Test, learn, trash it. Create, destroy. It was iterative. One of our lagers, we did 600 batches till we got it to work. And you know how I a little segue, but it only got to work because we put it in the tank before Christmas and then it was shit. And the other brewer at the site couldn't be bothered to drop it out of the tank and do CIP on one tank until, and then there was going to be a big Christmas break. When he came back to work, he went to ditch the tank, but poured a bit out to see if it had cleared up. Actually, he wanted to see if it had cleared. And he said, you need to get on a train. Something's happened. Something's happened. And, anyway, I sort of go back. So it was really just create, destroy. And then I started, when I got comfortable, I started bottling it. And I didn't know what to do. I had nothing about the industry. I've never been in it. So I was getting a poster tube, putting a single bottle in it. And dear Brewdog, do you want my beer in your bar? Dear Tesco's, And the head buyer of Tesco's, which is equivalent size of sort of Walmart or something, was just okay, so you obviously have no clue, but I really like your product. But he said, more than that, I really like you guys, And at this point, I'd been sending them out to my friends and a group of friends I went to school with. We had a chat group during COVID. There was shortages of everything, and we all had kids, so we were chatting it. And James, who would later become my business partner, was like, "I'll make you a website so you can sell things." And we were just slinging stuff out through Instagram, through Facebook. People would just send me a text, and I'd get a bank transfer for £10 and then send it out. And what the strangest thing became the catalyst for growth is we had a spate of sending out bottles and they all got destroyed. And I wanted to buy a can seamer. but they were really expensive, like $1,000, for just sealing. And then I couldn't get cans because it was COVID. So we thought, what if we went to someone else and made a bigger batch of beer? And I actually remember standing with James in absolute horror that we had an entire half pallet of beer to sell. And we were like, we are never, ever, ever going to get rid of all of this. And it sold in the first day. And it was this. What we would do is we would start brewing a beer at Northern Monk in their Old Flax store, which was they were incredibly generous. They loved what we did, so they just gave us the headroom for it. And we were there all of the time and just using their stuff. And I didn't know, like, Luca Lorenzoni was like the CEO, but I'd never met him and I didn't know him. And one time I was packaging on my own and the guy was leaving and I went, hey, fuck, don't leave me here on my own. Come and help me. And he looked, and we were chatting for ages. He never said about it. And then one of the other, like the brewer that was running, come in and was like, what are you guys doing? So there was no big plan. I had no idea what I built the plane while I was flying it. It's worth shouting out. There's a US website called Ultra Low Brewing, and I think that helped solve so many problems that I was having. And of course, literally every craft brewer in the UK was helping me in some way, shape or form. And that I wish I knew. I would have such a bad TED talk of, well, how did it happen? What made it special?
Sure.
But it was just all of the things we liked put together. And we didn't ever think about profits or margins, or it was just something to turn the wheels until we went back to work. But unfortunately, it got worse. So we had to move. We lost our business. We lost our home. We moved to North Wales. We sat in, we'd gone from a 3-bedroom detached house with a garden to living in a 2-bedroom apartment over a shop in a rural area with no chance of work. But it's all we could afford with what was left of our savings. And Mash Gang became a thing for me to waste time on. And waste time on it, I did every single day. And that's how we got to the beginning.
And so here we are now in 2025, and you've got some investment, and things are. You're now brewing in different places.
Yeah. We actually got on that really quickly because, I would just, and this phrase would actually come back to be a very choice set of words. I said, well, if you were recording an album, you wouldn't make a record, like a recording studio and a record label before you'd even learn how to play your instruments. And that's what we're doing. So why would we build a brewery, And I looked at, there's a great book that I suggest that every brewer reads so they can understand the motivation behind some of the stupid things that they're asked to do. And it's called Brand Love. Russ from Northern Monk actually gave me a copy. It's things like Lego and Monster, but it goes through exactly how they make their brand alluring to their target market. And they become instrumental. So we just went to loads of breweries and said, can we produce beer here? And they said, yeah. And some of them were very, very good breweries, and we were incredibly lucky. And I've had the privilege to work with so many amazing brewers, and truly Mash Gang stood on the shoulders of giants, but we've never been shy about saying that.
That seems to be a common story, especially in the NA world. And, even big brands here in the United States got their start contract brewing with other really, really talented craft brewers. And, but that's the nature of this. It's craft beer. Everyone, we work together. There's that extra capacity. There's smart people. There's problems to solve. And, and here we are.
There was I think I'm attributing to the right person. Pete Vick, who was at Garden Brewery at the time in Zagreb. He said he enjoyed the project when we started working on it because it seemed like the last challenge left in craft brewing that the customer might actually want? And he said, I've done all my heavily fruited goes and my sours and my barrel aged import. Because the problem is someone comes in and goes, I want something new. And you go, great. And you give them a bourbon barrel aged beer and they buy one of them and leave. And that's it, and beer is still a volume game. So how do you entrance the customer? Continuous improvement. And we made so many beers, so many different beers. I was sick of I want control of when I'm drinking. I want control of it. I don't indulge. It's like, but when you go to a bar, and we're going to talk about the Imperial Stag, when we go to the bar, your friends have got a kind of vanilla milkshake IPA, and the other person's got a Belgian Kriek. And what have I got? I've got a glass of sad, and that was my choice. And there's always, I just said there's only so many cans of Monster and a can of Coke that I can drink. And I just drink water. Some witty fucking commentator the other day said, if I didn't want to drink, I would just go to the pub and order a cup of tea. And I thought, you fucking imbecile, man. There's no one going to a pub at 8 o'clock at night and going, can I have a cup of tea? 10 o'clock, 11. Can you imagine pushing your way to the bar in Leeds, shoulder to shoulder and going, excuse me, mate, can I have a cup of tea? Yeah, that didn't happen.
No, the bartender would make fun of you for that.
Yeah, it would just be like, would you just...
And everyone around you be like, no.
No, just leave,
Yeah.
But
now you've got a solution to that with Mash King. The style is cool. Obviously it connects with craft beer. You coming out of a tattoo parlor, you've definitely got an aesthetic, to what you do, and it feels there's that idea that you can play in the game here in this kind of craft beer world, have something that looks cool, that tastes good, but also doesn't have alcohol and also doesn't feel out of place in this beer world. I want to change some gears and talk about how you go about making this beer, because I think I
can't talk about that. No, it's good. No,
that's what our audience really wants to hear. So I want to change gears, talk about how you make this beer. But before we do that, both classic and contemporary indie hops Lorien was developed with crisp, low-gravity beer in mind. A nod to the past with an eye to the future, Lorien seamlessly combines traditional elements of European noble hops with an elegant twang of American modernity. Low alpha and squeaky clean, Lorien provides a refined, smooth bitterness to any lager and delivers enticing flavors and aromas of lemon lime zest, fresh melon, wildflowers, sweet hay, and cinnamon spice. Refreshing the past for our present time, Lorien's classic profile and distinct finish are conducive to celebration and appetite and evoke feelings of a grassy meadow near a cold mountain stream. Summer is near and Lorien awaits. Learn more about Lorien and the rest of Indie's varieties at www.indiehops.com. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And Extra Tough has been making rugged and reliable boots for 75 years, built for the harshest conditions. The Legacy Collection styles are oil, acid, and chemical resistant with a non-slip rated outsole. Be prepared for whatever comes your way and shop the latest Extra Tough boots on extratough.com. That's extratuff.com. All right, Jordan. So you brewed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of iterative batches of non-alcoholic beer to try to dial in your thing. You've also then continued to iterate that process, brewing with partner breweries on multiple continents at this point. Where you are today with your non-alcoholic process in a broad sense, and then I'm curious, because other brewers I talk to do have some variation in their general process based on the style of non-alcoholic beer that they're brewing, and some of that changes up depending on what that eventual goal is. But from maybe we'll start at a high level and then start walking through that kind of beer design process. Starting with raw ingredients, and then kind of going through process through that. As you start thinking about writing a beer recipe now or improving one that you have, where does your mind generally start?
Oh, that's great. I mean, the challenges, right? And I feel like when I design every single beer, I feel like the best beers always feel like a cohesive thing where it's lots of spiky parts pulling away from each other, right? So it's insane amount of balance that goes on. And
spiky parts pulling apart from each other.
Yeah, but but what I mean is that like the aroma, the bitterness, the sweetness, the dryness, the carbonation, the mouthfeel, the head like they're all these things that are vying for attention, and you have to give them all their space. And ethanol tends to draw them together.
I like this analogy because I think we think about cohesion and smooth, but something that's perfectly smooth and round is also uninteresting.
It is. It's exactly the things that make craft beer exciting are the things that make it not that round ball. It's like whether it's a high ABV, really intensive processing adjuncts, or what massive kind of like very highly carbonated salty beers or whatever it is, that knowing where to fill the gaps in the mix, like I think that when you brew non-alcoholic beers, there's kind of just a big gap in the middle. And I know that we talk, this is really important, and I'm happy to share this by, we talked about abstracts earlier. And
before we started the podcast,
we
were talking about episode 420 of the podcast, sponsored by Abstracts. Yeah,
and I wanted to be episode 420, but they earned it more than I did. So and I really think that some of that profile, you need to have like a bit of fruit and a bit of those kind of components that make up a great fermentation profile. Like if you use a kind of a yeast like Voss, you'll get loads of actual stone fruit flavors. But, this will surprise you. But the first yeast we used in Chug was Voss. So it was a Quake. So,
use a Quake yeast in your non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah.
All right.
And the rationale for it was safety, right? It was one of the first yeasts that we got to work in Chug. This beer was incredibly challenging to make. Incredibly challenging. But the first yeast we used in it, and for over a year, was that. And we were fermenting at 40 degrees centigrade.
So, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. She was rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
15 minutes
are you then,
from pitch.
Just so I understand this, are you going to then arresting fermentation, or are you removing alcohol after the...
Neither of those. I'll get to it.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Yeah, you can shut up because you're getting it wrong. Perfect. No, so there... If we want to, we can step away from that and go into the more hard methodology, which is what the people listening to this won't know. Is the reason I'm saying, like, for safety is pasteurization. It was going to be impossible at that point. It isn't now, and it's essential for the US. You guys have crazy temperature changes, and it's a very big challenge for non-alcoholic beers. Is preservation and keeping that flavor, but we couldn't do that early on. These batches were 15 hectoliters. It's like a pallet and a half sort of thing.
Small brews on small commercial systems.
It cost us nearly $2 to make each can, and we'd sell them for like $2.50 essentially. Do you know what I mean?
Sure,
so it was it wasn't exactly a great enterprise. But the way I worked it was this: if a IPA is 5% and then a double IPA is 8%, well, how did you get to that? Oh, but control the yeast, the grains, maybe even added sugar, and and it normally has double the heavy hop load and stuff like that, and it all goes towards it. I was like, what if we looked at like the worst attenuating grains and terrible yeasts? We use things like Windsor, and that was my rationale. I was like, people are making this too hot. They're brewing a beer and then they're boiling off the alcohol. And I've used the analogy a million times, but if Impossible and Beyond Meat started a vegan burger by cutting up a cow and then removing the cow from it, it would just seem really weird. It seemed like a very large waste of energy. Before anyone gets too hot and heavy, I do actually think that now ethanol removal systems have got so much better that they're probably a good lightning change for the business. But I still feel a slightly odd way of doing things. It's not usual. But I understand why people do it. And I don't think it always is terrible, but it is responsible for a hell of a lot of bad beer. And not understanding that process and not understanding the pasteurization process and its effectiveness against bioburden, how you do it. You want to kind of have the minimum amount of intervention with these beers, and that helps sustain them. And I think that's a really important part. But realistically, it's the way that we did it is we controlled the level of sugar at a finite level. And it's not my idea, like ultra low brewing, there were high mash temperatures, and just doing everything wrong deliberately.
Right.
But the other thing is the temptation is to make a cheap product because it's already high margin. So, I mean, if you had a brewery and you were selling fully leaded, NA could be a real money spinner for you, but then it can also be a real perilous thing because you get cheap on it to get an ever larger margin. And you've also got a trapped audience. If you've got people that are driving on, they'll have to have the NA option that you've provided. So we, like I said, we spent an entirely large amount of money on ingredients, and we were very fastidious with our suppliers. And I'd like to like to thank Indie Hops for sending me loads of stuff when I needed it as well. Yakima were really good as well, and Barfhass let us have early things, Incognito and Spectrum.
Right.
For us, I remember saying, well, we don't really suffer from hop creep. It's not ever been a problem. And then one day it just happened, and then it never went away. And, I cursed myself with that. But Incognito and Spectrum and a lot of the more modern kind of liquid hops should be the backbone of NA beers because, but then we were dry hopping at like 25 grams a liter, which isn't just an insane amount of hops, and that's how we kind of force the flavor in. Something we've engineered out over time, but we highly relied on maltodextrin to the fact where we were like putting tons of it in stuff, and then we found a slightly better version, which was very hard to find, but it was called highly branched cyclic dextrin. And it's used in sports science. There's only one producer of it in the world, I think. And we were trying to buy like a lot of it, but we found it had a very unusual tendency. So you guys go and try this and see if you taste it. But what happens in that doesn't happen in maltodextrin? Do you know what this is? I never get to talk about this stuff, man. No one cares. I'm finally really happy.
We're your audience, Jordan.
This is the greatest thing, But the more highly branched cyclic dextrin has a bitterness suppression to it and off-note sort of suppression. And they use it frequently in low-calorie ice cream and diet sodas and things like that. And it's very good at suppressing any kind of unpleasant bitterness, which meant that we could start to jack up hot side hops, and we're getting like quite heavy IBU loads, and then using cyclic to essentially remove that part. So that allowed us to dry.
Still get some more of the textural benefit from those hops too.
Not just that, but the aroma, the flavor.
Yeah.
Like,
interesting.
And it was like for if anyone's a music nerd, it was like using a compressor on the spiky bits. Mm-hmm. So it pushed it. Now we just have a big pyramid. You know what I mean? It's like it was. We've sort of engineered it out over time because it's an ultra process thing, and I have a desire to make beer, not science experiments, right? So it's like I'm not exactly Reinheitsgeburt, but I try my best, you know?
Sure.
And that, so I want to say a little about, you know, you said we made loads and loads of beers. So I've tried a load of different methodologies. And I think if you want to if you were making a mild or anything that has like a little sweet undertone and you do have access to tunnel pasteurization, you should experiment with arrested fermentation. It's really, really difficult. But also you can't do it at great scale because you need to cold crash it fast. It takes like 2 or 3 days to cold crash our tank properly, I think, you know, the bigger ones. So that's not really an option. I've also spent a lot of time working with maltose negative yeast and also with Christian Hansen's Near. They've rebranded the company. It was acquired. I can't remember what it's called. But if you've ever had a NA beer from Michela or Tuel or anything like that, you would notice that familiar peachy tang to it. We don't use that simply because the controls, you need to almost be 24 hours a day available. In fact, we actually had like a repeater set up with telemetry with 4G that would text me when I had to go and turn the tank over. And it wouldn't matter if it was 4 a.m,
Right.
I had to go. And that gets old really fast. But I will say that if you have the time, the patience, you can make a amazing beer with it. It just keeps going. It makes incredibly large amounts of like esters, like,
Right.
but it does have a very distinctive peachy note, and it can get a bit wearing if all of them are like that. But
If all the beers,
but I would use it again. I use a broad range of yeasts. My current pet faves are sort of like a lot of the Amiga, Heliogazer, Lunar Crush, the kind of filialized, gene-edited stuff. We don't use them in the beers at the moment, and we probably won't because they're not legal in the UK.
Right. You could use those here. You can't,
Yeah, but I have made stuff with them. Actually, we did a beer called Council Pop, and we used Luminosa and Audacia and Strata X, I think it was, and Heliogazer together. And I would say that combo, you probably can't tell it's alcohol-free. Most beer, not NA beers, you could at least have a hint that they were low ABV, but that one, you wouldn't know. It was probably the best bit of work I've ever done. But it costs about £1 million a can to make.
Sure. And I'm jumping ahead here, but before we move on, like, what is it that you think captures that spirit of beerness? And
off notes.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually, we ended up putting like our favorite double IPAs that we paneled, a lot of other half, root and branch, stuff like that, putting them through gas chromatographs and looking at the amylase and the sort of like all of the different things in there. And we found that like basically the things that sort of would in great quantities make beer bad are the very things that sort of make it good. When we'll do panels, and it's sort of like things that smell a bit like pear drop or banana or tomato. They're kind of the things that make up that whole, the whole package as it is. And also I think, we've experimented before with things like in the boil, putting Szechuan peppercorns in. And I'm like, I always like fucking around with kind of culinary stuff. I think I would have preferred to be a chef, but the hours suck, man. Like, and it's a precise molecular gastronomy kind of thing going on that we do. It's more akin to food prep than it is beer sometimes, because we kind of come right back from what we want the customer to experience. Hopefully a lot of you guys agree, but a lot of beer industry stuff is like, we made it because we didn't know what it'd be like. We just made it, and then now it's here. And that's how we used to do things. And then now I'm trying to brew for a plan. It's unusual, but it's slightly easier.
Sure. Well, I want to get back to kind of talking about recipe, and I absolutely want to understand the process here.
Yeah.
Because you've debunked any of my guesses so far, and we've kind of covered all of the major ones that I would initially think of. So I want to figure out what exactly that is that you're doing there. But I also want to really talk about kind of texture, fullness, and I love this idea that you can, boost extra hop character while keeping bitterness low using some of that kind of, appropriate.
More sort of like food science stuff.
Food science there.
There's a company in the UK that's definitely worth looking up just to go and crib what they have on their site, and it's called like Special Ingredients, and they just make stuff for the kind of guys that make like tapioca pearl, sort of like like real Michelin star stuff. But they have things like Zorbit, which is like, I think it's made like from yams. It's made to make if you make a clarified tomato soup or something and you want it to have volume and flavor. So if you're finding that you're particularly on small batch things, you're not getting that kind of fullness, you should look outside of the beer industry. In fact, all brewers should stop looking at the beer industry and start looking at food and soda industries and looking at the great toys that they have to play with, because you can be thoroughly in control of your process from end to end.
Especially here in this evolving thing, which where you're changing parameters on beer and need to work with a different set of tools in order to achieve that. Okay, we're gonna talk about what those tools are, but before we do that, ready to explore the new frontier of freshness, CryoFresh from Yakima Chief Hops combines the innovation of cryo hops with the frozen fresh hop concept of YCH Trials 301 and 302, capturing the aromatic vibrancy of fresh hop harvest in an easy-to-use pellet form. Harness the magic of hop harvest anywhere, anytime. Available through pre-order. Lock in the fresh-picked flavors of CryoFresh from Yakima Chief Hops. Visit yakimachief.com for more information. Also, if you're launching a brewery or acquiring an existing one, consider our brewery workshop and new brewery accelerator. September 14th through 17th in Fort Collins, Colorado. Over 4 days, we engage in panel discussions, technical brewery tours, networking, and small working group sessions to help you better understand and prepare for the challenges of brewery operation. Tickets are on sale now. Visit breweryworkshop.com for more information and to secure your spot. And let's go back. Let's get back and talk about that recipe process and then some of the technical process behind that. So you think about brewing an IPA these days. You think about hops are a big component of that. You're not just thinking about
Absolutely.
it in terms of flavor. You're thinking about it in terms of fullness, and you're also thinking about how they work within the entire context of this beverage. And you certainly lean on some favorites that work for you really well.
Oh, you noticed that, did you? Yeah. I think the best bit of advice when it comes to hop is find out the ones that don't work straight away. I cannot make an NA beer with Mosaic, and I don't know why. Every single one of them is terrible. I just give up. Like the backbone of nearly every beer that I like.
Sure.
Is just I think it just doesn't work in NA.
When you say
brewing.
it doesn't work, what does that mean?
It's just it just doesn't taste good.
Okay.
It doesn't taste like it should. I just find that it's overly bitter. It's kind of just gassy and nasty. It's just, it doesn't work for me. I wish that I could give you a better explanation. It's just horrible. That's the only way.
Are there any other dead ends out there in the hop world that you found?
There hasn't been many. There has been some that are just not effective at all. You're almost symbolically putting them. I can't remember. Barb Roos didn't. I thought it was going to taste like strawberries, and it tasted like nothing. So that kind of sucked. But then there are other things. Like you mentioned some of the HBC. There's a HBC 630, which was like a hybridized one that had like really high lactones in it. What that means for our beer. Number one, people didn't like HBC 630 because you had to use so much of it to get an effect. It was not a very, you get used to using Citra, and it's you can barely use any of it, and it just rides roughshod over every other hop. But it's the HBC 630. It smelled a bit like pool inflatables, but it had that kind of. It made the beers have a very good alcohol analog. It smelled and felt kind of like a beer, and then they discontinued it. And then I went around Europe buying all of it because I wouldn't let go of it. But that hop choice, it's like finding the ones. And I think some of your old you can make your Czech lagers and stuff, and it works in an NA just great. Your Saz and kind of old ones that work really well. I mean, Nelson Sauvin is a hop I overuse to a colossal amount. I can't stop using it because it's just so delicious. In that vein, I
could see that, especially with some of that kind of petrochemical note
and that white winey gooseberry. The cat pissed in the room next door, but it's kind of nice, And
some of that actually does almost, it's adjacent to ethanol itself.
So that's what I'm looking for.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to get at is I try and I want to make beers for people who don't drink and do drink, and that means that one of my friends pointed out, she said that she prefers to drink basically garbage NA beers because she was an alcoholic, and she's like, this fits in the thing, but it doesn't get me too close to beer. And she's like, my boyfriend, same thing as me, but he will only drink the best NA beer because that's what keeps him off it keeps him on the wagon. But she said, I think if I had it, it would kind of, it would lead me to think, oh, I miss beer so much, so she just drinks hot trash, and, good for you, darling. But that kind of, that's what I look for in grains as well.
Yeah.
And mistreating yeast, under pitching quite a lot. To kind of force it to give me something more.
Well, you said bad grains earlier, so you're looking for grain. You're looking for the opposite of extract efficiency,
or I'm kind of when we're talking like things that will survive high mash temperature,
right.
and won't.
But you don't need it to attenuate highly and create a whole bunch of alcohol.
Correct. You just do the opposite of what you usually do.
You're trying to get a flavor in there, and you're also trying to find
body
grain that works with the yeast that you're using, so that it doesn't create that warty, grainy character.
But I feel like if you use Pilsner or extra pale, like they don't do that. Like the darker the grain, the wortier war you're. At the moment, I'm fighting with this cerveza. I have a boss now. I never had a boss before. But he wanted one thing. He just wants me to nail a cerveza, and I just, it's so hard. It's just real. I work with two great Mexican brewers, and they taught me just about everything, because there's a huge craft beer scene in Guadalajara, in Guadalajara and Mexico City now. It's like banging beer coming out of there. So I wanted to learn from those guys, and God bless them. Paracadicia, my pronunciation's not very good, but I tried. Okay, Adrian, I tried. This is a massive challenge, because I want to use like Vienna malt, like in Brooklyn. Sure. But damn, she worty, and you've got to balance that up. So I think like extra adjuncts like oats are super good. But you kind of have to be so careful you get the right kind that aren't really dusty and weird, because otherwise if you've got a hot strike there, you can make glue really quickly. At Verdant, great British brewery, they used to just call me Stuck Mash Gang, and we broke pumps and stuff. Oh my god,
the Stuck Mash Gang! I love it.
It was just because every single time, and I tell you what, the most brutal part of the process when we were trying to get the highest strike temperature. So it was like nearly boiling sometimes. And, the hot liquor tanks like rocking and rolling like Homer's nuclear power plant, and then we would get like 90 degrees centigrade stuck mashes and stuff. And it's like, what do you do? We'll put some CO2 under the plates and see if we can. No, we've just blown and that was the worst. But there was, we brewed at Fierce in Aberdeen, and I just had a phone call from Dave, and he was just like, my beautiful fucking new floor. Like, he waited years to get a new floor in the brewery, and the first gigantic brew we did there, it just stuck. And there was a new brewer on site. I'd left that day because I was like, job done. I know. And my flight was at I used to have to fly to Aberdeen. It's not fun. And you're just on a plane with loads of Texan oil guys for some reason every single time. But the new brewer panicked when the mash stuck and opened the door on it to see and I said, my God, if your periscope doesn't work on a submarine, you don't open the window to see if you're underwater. But yeah, the stuck mashes were a frequent disaster.
So super hot. You were trying to make this pretty unfermentable.
Yes. Everything you don't want to do, you got to do. And that, like the fermentation cycle, we're now kind of doing things a bit different. It doesn't work quite as well at scale. So we're sort of having to change things as we scale up. And I'm not being cagey and holding anything back. Sure. I simply don't know when we take the next production step how it will be done now. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you it almost certainly won't be dealcoholization, and it will be all to do with precision. Brewers love precision anyway. Like, this is just a very hyper-focused brew. Give it a try. You'll like it. Sure. You'll like doing it. It will be fun.
Is there a boil and hot side, process to this? And, because
I've tried like decoctions and stuff. I normally I go for a fairly arbitrary 1 hour boil, but we have, when I was working at Thomas Lab and Pete Vick at Garden Brewer in Zagreb, I would watch them do stuff with traditional, European methods, and we did decocted lagers. We made sort of like Keller beers and stuff like that. And I don't do much. The boil is fairly arbitrary, boring, like our boil. Just kind of get it going. I have to admit, when I was struggling with that cerveza, I'm like, I'm getting so desperate. I might get to a point where I do a decoction in a minute, and no one likes doing those in the breweries. You're moving around loads of boiling hot liquid.
But there's some benefit to that than cooking this, very unfermentable wort that you've made. That also helps build that kind of beer flavor to it.
It doesn't just do that. It might be bro science, okay? No one pull me up on this, guys. There's loads of things you do that are not driven by science. But I think that it makes the color, the head retention, and the vibe of the beer is better. Lagers, if they're decocted, if they're NA, but it's just a pain in the ass. We don't do it very much. The around the bottle, you're going to not have a level of sweetness that you're used to working with. So you kind of have to make sure that you don't just end up with an outrageously bitter and unbalanced beer that feels like a bike with the wheels falling off. It's
right.
You actually need to become an expert in what I would call extreme balance. Something needs to pull in every single direction. So it's like in the instances, it has like a little bit of there's a little bit of mango in there, and it's that kind of just gives it a little enough that you don't feel like it's just hot water.
Right.
And I think it kind of sits in the middle. Yeah, there's quite transparent grain profiles in these particular beers. Obviously in the stouts, there's character, so yeah, that is a challenge.
Interesting. So let's talk about fermentation then. And like you said, you've experimented with lots and lots of different yeasts.
At the moment, I'm going through, if I want something really clean, I'm going for a bit of a loner phase, especially if I want sweetness, because it's like really hyper, like maltose negative yeast. It's a bit expensive and it's a bit of a pain to work with sometimes. But if I want something to be very, very transparent in its fermentation profile, that would be kind of where I go. I actually, my recommendation is if you're starting to mess around with these things, like just look at your traditional lazy yeasts. Windsor's a very good place to start. The yeast, not the town. Windsor's not a very good place to start anything. I'd start with that and kind of, I would always say, like, if you're, brew like a small beer, like aim for 1.5%, 2%, and start there and then slowly but surely find out what works and crank it down, keep cranking it down, get it there. And you actually mathematically, you'll thank me for this, aim under where you want to be every single time, because it will try and creep up on you. But the amount is staggering. This is like 0.23 when it finishes fermentation. After all of its dry hopping and hootenanny, it's like in the 0.4 region. So it creeps quite far.
Creep and non-alcoholic.
Yeah. I guess one of the things that I should also say is like managing the liquid is really important. And the fundamentals are such that, we need to make sure that it's not just clean. It's like, it like unbelievably clean. Like everything needs to be like, you need your cleaning in place, like really up to, you don't get the apprentice to do it on Friday night before he goes home. Everything has to be a thorough job. And the squeeze as it is that, over time, it kind of becomes, I don't know where I'm going with that.
Well, we've been talking for a while now, and you've got to make your next appointment here because you've got a busy day. But so I want to just sum it up and tell me if I'm getting this wrong. Key to fermentation is non-alcohol producing yeast.
Well, not so much non-alcohol, but low alcohol producing, lazier, low alcohol. And it's not just because
and a highly unfermentable combined with a highly unfermentable.
Yeah, that would, because you end up with just a lot. Your challenge is always going to be, how do I get that body in there?
Right.
How do I keep it there? That's the challenge.
advanced hop products that are flowable and
Absolutely. Although flowable, it says at room temperature. Yeah, room on the bloody sun, not in Wales in winter. It's
sure.
Scraping the resin.
And and then any post fermentation or during fermentation hop additions in some of your hoppier beers.
Oh, absolutely! Like I will dry hop 4 times, and sometimes
4 times.
Yeah, I've been doing weird stuff as well, like hopping, centrifuging, and a lot of the brewers I work with are sick of hearing the word centrifuge because
What's the benefit of multiple centrifuging there?
I just do it because everyone hates it, and I like to make people's lives. I don't know. It's trying.
How can we make this beer more expensive?
Yeah, how can we make this harder than it already is, and it's already really hard. Things like I'll spin out the yeast early, so it's got less chance of getting creepy. Right. But just part of it is really unreasonable process controls. You have to watch it every day. Like telemetry is good, like live tank telemetry. But when you're thinking about fractions of a percentage, it's gonna be, tight. Sure. And we do not produce up to like 0.5. We're always undershoot it.
Right.
The last thing I want is federal agents breathing down my neck. So I make sure that that's always tight. Speaking
of federal agents or food safety, how do you cover the food safety piece on this? Because alcohol is its own safety provider in some sense, and in this kind of
definitely worth actually, like, people that listen to this go and do a little bit of research about the threshold where it starts kicking in, because it's actually quite a lot higher than you would expect. I would expect ethanol to be like great from the get-go at preservation. When we started, I just went through all the regular soft drink preservation things.
Sure.
It was like potassium sorbate, sodium benzoate, which is in Pepsi, and then like equivalent of like Camden tablets and things like that. And now it is a highly controlled tunnel pasteurization like matrix that we've worked out, and really the job is the absolute minimum amount of tampering that you can do with temperature whilst still being
hitting your PU goals,
hitting the PU goals, and that's you got to keep a leash on it.
Cool. In terms of making the beer excellent, what would you say the key takeaways are? Because you can make beer that way, but making great beer. Are there intangibles there?
I think you have to, once again, it's extreme balance. Customers want to be wowed. So I find that little things like really making sure that pH is like hitting, is it appropriate for the style? Not just jacking loads of carbonation in it because you felt like you didn't do a good enough job on the body. Like allow yourself to succeed, Don't arbitrarily gatekeep yourself. Don't cheap out. Spend loads of money on your first successful brews and then work out how to cut the costs later with better additions. But don't compromise out the gate just because it's an NA, because you're setting yourself up to fail straight away. Or do. I don't want the competition, man.
Fair. What's the future look like? What does the next 3 to 5 years look like for Mash Gang? What's exciting? What scares you to death? And where do you see things going over the next 3 to 5?
God.
And maybe that's too far. What's the next 1 to 2 look like?
The things that scare me to death is like the depths of British pubs. Like it sucks. Like it's really major. And I could talk for hours. It's not helpful or anything. People can't afford to go there, or they're just working so many hours that you don't have time to go to the pub anymore. And it
reminds me of that old, there was that old saying, home taping is killing the record industry.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember the Dead Kennedys put that on the back side of that fresh fruit for rotting vegetables cassette tape.
Yeah,
so we've left this side of the tape empty for your taping pleasure.
Yeah, that was good.
And I think about that home drinking is killing the pub and hospitality industry.
Well, groceries, why would you go to a specialty place when when you can now get a great beer in the grocery store? So I've heard it all, and I've seen it all, and that's the bit that terrifies me. The next 5 years, I'm a I'm a pretty aspirational person. I don't dream small. You know, I would like to see us genuinely as one of the world's largest breweries.
All right.
What's the point of doing anything if you don't? Like, I'm not in school anymore, right? The guy, you know, people say to me, "Oh, you've sold out," and I'm like, "Of course I have." But I know what you do for a living. You work in a bank. I know exactly how much you sell out for. It's about $32,000 a year. Oh, well, it's exactly the same. My job was to get as much liquid in hand. Like, we're doing this thing. I shouldn't have done it, but I said, I bet I could hand out 30,000 cans in a week in Denver. I think as of now, we've done like 14,000 yesterday or something.
Damn.
So I think that we're not going to take the whole week to do it. I think we're going to have it done by today or tomorrow. We would have done 30,000. That said, if you do hear the podcast and want to get handle of some free beer in Denver, do drop me a line. Jordan@mashgang.beer. Not hard to find.
This will be out long after you're gone. Sorry to ruin that opportunity.
This would actually be the second time I've done that. So we can cut that.
Sure. Anyway, Jordan, it's from dealing with challenging COVID situation and losing a business, taking that time to knuckle down on brewing and learn and practice and iterate, to now having a brand brewed on multiple continents with multiple brewing partners. And
it's weird, isn't it?
It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
It's quite the arc, and I wouldn't be betting against you right now.
Oh, thank you, man. I try not to look up too much, and I just keep grinding. I keep all the only life ever asked me to do is like make the liquid better. You know, and that's a pretty good job, really, isn't it?
That it is, and that is a great place to bring this to a close. G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across North America and beyond. Berkeley yeast bioengineers ordinary strains to make them extraordinary. Old Orchard's flavored craft juice concentrate blends now include fruit punch, guava, kiwi, and pomegranate. Indie Hops Lorien combines traditional elements of noble hops with an elegant twang of modernity. Extra Tough has been making rugged and reliable boots for 75 years. Harness the magic of hop harvest anytime with Cryo Fresh from Yakima Chief Hops. And the Brewery Workshop will help prepare you for the challenges of brewery operation. If you've enjoyed this podcast, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on the subscribe button. Support us, help us bring you these great conversations week after week, month after month, year after year, issue after issue in both our Craft Beer and Brewing magazine and our Brewing Industry Guide for those of you in the professional side of this. Jordan, if people want to learn more about Mash Gang, or Stuck Mash Gang, as it were, where can they find you?
Mashgang.beer, and on Instagram, mash__gang. There was already a Mash Gang and they're like a bunch of school kids. So I didn't want to steal their handle, but I did want to steal their name. And on LinkedIn, I'm just Jordan. That's it. That's what I got on there.
Jordan@mashgang.beer.
Easy to remember, easy to find.
Thanks for joining me on the podcast. Thanks for talking to me about brewing non-alcoholic beer.
I'm so glad we got to do it face to face. It's actually a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much, man.
Fantastic. Cheers.
Bye.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media @craftbeerbrew.